Stop the presses. The official .NET MAUI integration for Aspire is here, and in this video, we're going to check it out. In an earlier video, I showed you the .NET MAUI integration for .NET Aspire, as it was called back then. Now it's just Aspire, no .NET anymore, because it's also for JavaScript, it's also for Python, it's also for Rust, it's also for all kinds of other cool things. But focus, Gerald, .NET MAUI. So the .NET MAUI integration with .NET Aspire back then was cool, but also it wasn't really cool because it only worked for Visual Studio on Windows, and .NET Aspire is not just for .NET anymore, and .NET MAUI has never been only on Windows, so it was time to fix that. So we, as the .NET MAUI team, now provided the integration to Aspire to make it run with Aspire natively. So we just wrote the integration on the Aspire repository as part of the official Aspire product, and now it can run through .NET Run, the Aspire CLI, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio on Windows, any other IDE, wherever you want to go. So it was about time to make an updated video, and in this video we're going to see what you can do with this new Aspire integration for .NET MAUI. Now, before we're going to hop over to my screen share and I'm going to show you exactly what this can do for your .NET MAUI project, a couple of things. First, this is still in preview, right? It has been released as a preview version because there's a couple of rough edges that we already know about. There's probably some that we don't know about yet. So I would love for you to try it out with an open mindset. Let me know the feedback that you have under this video, or better yet, if you think it's like an issue, it's a bug, go to the Aspire repository and report it there so that we can work on it. The other thing is, maybe you don't know what Aspire is. Let me know down in the comments as well, and I can make follow-up videos for you or specific scenarios that you're wondering about. But the other thing I wanted to tell you is Aspire can do a lot of things, right? It can take all your web services, all your JavaScript files, all your things, and deploy that as well, right? So a lot of questions that we get for the .NET MAUI stuff is like, hey, how is this going to help me deploy? Is this going to help me monitor my .NET MAUI application in production? No. For the time being, no. At this time, I also don't see any path going there in the future, but I can't look into the future, unfortunately, but who knows, right? But right now, this is only to help you for your local development experience, for your local inner dev loop. And I think it's already going to be a great help for that, and you will love it. So with that, let's just hop over to my screen share and show you what it's all about. All the code for the sample that I'm about to show you is hosted here on the Microsoft Learn samples browser. It has samples for all kinds of stuff: Aspire, Blazor, ASP.NET, Azure, .NET MAUI. We have like 100 samples right here because I filtered on the .NET MAUI ones. And you can see it right here, the .NET MAUI Aspire integration, right? So if you click that, you get a little bit of a README, and all of this is hosted on a GitHub repository as well. So if you click Browse Code, you're taken to the GitHub repository with all the samples, and specifically this one with the MAUI Aspire one, right? So this is all here. I already opened that up in Visual Studio Code. Of course, it also works in Visual Studio, but I'm going to show you in Visual Studio Code. And actually, a little note on Visual Studio, there is the integrations for like right-clicking on a project to add it in an Aspire orchestration, right? That also works now for your MAUI app, but it doesn't work quite correctly yet at the time of recording. I'm working to get that resolved ASAP, but for now you have to do some manual steps. Again, if you want to learn how to set up your MAUI project or your application landscape with Aspire, let me know down in the comments and I'll make a video for that, right? So, but for right now, let's go into Visual Studio Code. Again, I cloned this repository. You can see all the samples are here. I want to go into the 10.0 because I'm talking about .NET 10. That's the minimum that you need for your .NET MAUI project to work with the Aspire stuff. So these are the samples that have to do with .NET 10. And then there is the web services folder and then the MAUI Aspire one with a couple of folders under that. The first one is your service defaults. So if you know a little bit about how Aspire works, it needs a set of service defaults, which configures the services that Aspire uses to do the telemetry, the metrics, the service discovery, all that kind of stuff. That lives in here. It's a separate project for your MAUI application so that we don't bring in all the ASP.NET stuff, and the ASP.NET stuff doesn't compile for a MAUI app anyway without doing all kinds of weird things. Now, the MAUI Aspire AppHost, that's arguably the most important part here for your Aspire orchestration. I'll get to that in a second. Actually, I might have, oh no, MAUI Aspire service default. So that's the service defaults for our sample web API that we have here, which is just a new ASP.NET web API project that serves the weather forecast. So nothing really fancy there. Our sample MAUI app, and then a sample hybrid WebView app and a sample Blazor hybrid app. So just focus on one of these, but just to show you that it doesn't just work for a MAUI app, but also for a hybrid web app, a Blazor hybrid web app. So it works with React, all this kind of stuff, and Blazor and all these things, right? So you've got all of that here in this nice sample. So if we go into the app host, you can see it right here. Maybe at the time that you're seeing this, I changed this a little bit because you can also use the single file app host, which is really cool. New feature from .NET 10, write C# .NET applications from one CS file. Really amazing. Let me know in the comments if you want to learn more about that as well. But for now, it's an app host project. If you're looking this a little bit into the future, there might be an apphost.cs just right here in the sample root. So the contents will be mostly the same, but just so you're not confused whenever you're watching this video and I updated the code right here. Now it's a project, and here you have the apphost.cs. And that's just like, let's get rid of the file explorer here so that we have the full view for this code. And let me zoom in a little bit more for you. We have the builder, so we're going to create a distributed application create builder, so we can, configure all the things on this builder. For the web API project, we're just going to say builder add project. We're going to reference the project, right? We did that in the CS proj, so we add a reference, and we have this unique identifier to the web API. Now, DevTunnels, also new in Aspire 13, we have DevTunnels integration. And DevTunnels is a way to create a remote accessible endpoint for your local service. So what this does is it creates a URL that you can go to. If you would be watching this video live, you could go to that endpoint and you can hit my local web API. So you could get the weather forecast from my local machine right here. For a weather forecast, not super helpful because it's random and not even true. But if you're testing in an organization with multiple teams or you're working from home, this is a way that other people can connect to your project while working somewhere else. Or you can connect to something because maybe you're running a .NET MAUI project on an emulator and you have trouble reaching kind of like, your local service because the address keeps changing, blah, blah, blah. You can use a dev tunnel to make that much, much easier. So DevTunnels right here, you can configure that with anonymous access, with reference, so that it knows to open the port for this web API right here. So we got that. Okay, cool. Now let's add our MAUI app. And with our MAUI app, we can say builder add MAUI project. We're going to again do that unique identifier. And then instead of a reference here with the web API, we're now going to point it to this CS proj file. Has reasons, doesn't really matter. Mostly multi-targeting got in the way, but this makes it so much easier. And this also, I think, is more in line with what they're trying to do with Aspire to, not make it .NET only, because you can only reference .NET project with like the old school references in CS proj, right? Now you can just say, hey, this is where my project lives, and this is how you can do things with it. Same thing for the Blazor hybrid app, right? We're pointing it to another project, and for the hybrid WebView app as well. But I'm going to focus on the MAUI app for now. But it's still a MAUI project, right? So you added the same way as the regular MAUI app, basically. So we're going to do that. And then from here, we're going to add our different targets, right? Because .NET MAUI is a single project. Usually, typically, if you would have like a multi-project MAUI setup, you can do that too. You'll just add the separate ones here and it will all work the same. But most of the projects is probably going to be single project. And then you're going to have to say, hey, I want to run this on the Windows target or the iOS target or the Android target, right? So the way to do that is to say MAUI app dot add Windows device. Right, and then you can say with reference, which is just an Aspire way of doing things, because this creates a resource. And now you can say create a reference to that web API, or you can say dot with environment, and you can create an extra environment variable here. See, you can set .NET System globalization invariant to false. I don't know what it is. Copilot came up with it. It's great. But so you can do all these things specifically on this Windows instance, right? Which is a little bit important, because what this enables is that you can add two resources in the Aspire orchestration here that have to do with Windows. Now you have to specify like a unique name, right? Because else it will have a collision there, but you will have to specify a unique name right here. You can do it like this. And then you can configure that differently. You'll get two things in the Aspire dashboard that we'll see in a minute, and you can start them both up and do different things with it. Maybe you have some kind of server client application that run from the same project, and you can do it like that. Or I don't know, you want to simulate kind of like multiple application instances and do some things. But I don't know what you want to do, but you can do it with the way that we've implemented now. I've got the same thing for the Blazor Hybrid app, the Hybrid WebView app, right? And this then refers back to this variable right here, because that's the cool thing about Aspire. You have everything here in code, and you can work with that. Now, I did put it in operating system is Windows, right? Because Windows only runs on Windows, Mac Catalyst and iOS only run on Mac OS, and Android runs on both, right? So I have an Android one here outside of the ifs. You can just leave them without these operating system is Mac OS, and the Aspire dashboard will automatically say like, hey, this is not supported, right? This is not supported on this host operating system. But just to keep your dashboard a little bit clean, I did it like this. And again, you can do that because everything is code here. Same thing for Mac Catalyst device, right? The naming might be a little bit odd, but it makes more sense whenever you get to the iOS simulator. And you can say add iOS device as well. So you can do simulators, you can do device, and the same thing, of course, with Android, add Android emulator or add Android device. And again, you can add multiple if that's what you want. So I can do this, I can add another emulator. You will probably have to specify which emulator to run on, right? So the specific emulator and device ID, that's definitely something that you want to do whenever you're going to add multiple. Again, let me know if you want to have follow-up videos. And a good note for Android is that you have to have the Android emulator running already whenever you're going to start the application. This is something weird in the Android tooling. I want to fix this with the Aspire integration for you, but we haven't got to it yet. So for now, make sure that the Android emulator is running whenever you're going to do this. Now, an extra challenge here, whenever you're going to do it with the iOS simulator or the Android emulator, is that is still going to want to talk to localhost for the open telemetry stuff, for the metrics, for all the data that comes out of your application. So for that, we've done with OTLP, Open Telemetry Protocol, I think it is, dev tunnel, and it's going to open another dev tunnel to push through the open telemetry metrics and diagnostics, right? So that it shows up in the dashboard as well. I'll show you that in a little bit, then it'll become more clear. And then you can say with reference web API through the public dev tunnel. So again, if you have been doing mobile development, not even with MAUI, with anything, you know that localhost does not always mean localhost. If you're going to talk to localhost from your .NET MAUI application, from your mobile application, if you run that on the Android emulator, it's not going to be localhost because now it's looking on your Android emulator to reach that web service, right? And it can't. So for that, we have this dev tunnel integration now, and it will go through the public endpoint to your local service, and it will just be able to reach that. Now, with that, with everything set up here, what you can do is go into the terminal, or you can go here in the run menu in Visual Studio Code, but I'm going to go to the terminal right here. Oops, and I'm going to do 10.0 and into the, what was it, web service folder, and then MAUI Aspire, and then MAUI Aspire, oops, .AppHost. Okay. And we're in the AppHost because that's the thing that you want to run to make this whole thing light up. If you have the Aspire CLI installed, it will look a little bit fancier. So you could do Aspire run. I'll do that in a second. The other thing that you can just do, because it's still a .NET project, you can just do .NET run and it will run all the same things and it will give you more or less the same output. But I'm going to use Aspire Run, the Aspire CLI, just because it's such a great ecosystem. It has all these cool things, including a CLI. And it's going to start building that for a little bit. And then whenever that's done, it will come with some information of like, hey, here's the log file. But more importantly, here is the dashboard that you can go into and see all these resources that you've registered here and start running them. right? So let's give this a second to come up. Again, the Aspire CLI is really cool. You can also do Aspire update. So in the AppHost one, and it will update that to the latest packages for all the integrations and things. So you don't have to go to NuGet and right click and manage packages and do all that kind of stuff. Just do Aspire update and it will update it for you, find the latest packages, all this cool stuff. Now, while I was talking, it says, hey, AppHost is running here, dashboard is running here, logs are running here, and if you want to stop doing this, press Control-C and it will stop that. On the Mac, that will of course be Command-C, but it will all work the same thing. Now let's click on this thing and it's going to open the browser and you will be brought to the Aspire dashboard. Now I've zoomed in a little bit, so don't worry, it shouldn't look like this. Like this is the original version, right? But it's a little bit small. So let's zoom in and you can see that the resources are starting up. The dev tunnel is running and unhealthy. It might be dev tunnels need a login. So there might be a bar here in the top that says, hey, dev tunnels needs your input to actually make this work. You can log in with your Microsoft account, with your GitHub account. And whenever you do, chances are that you're already logged into with this browser. So it will only open a new tab and say, okay, you're logged in, and it will automatically continue here. So that's really cool. For the Maui app, same thing, just uses a different endpoint. So that's all running. The dev tunnel is up and running. Cool. So if I just go directly here and you will scroll down here, you can see that my web API is running too on my local host, right? But we've connected that up through the app host and I need to do this dialog. It will say 404, but if I go to slash weather forecast, it will come up with the weather forecast, right? And this is hitting my local endpoint. This is hitting my local web API service. So we've got that already running. That's good. And here you can see then all the entries: Blazor hybrid app, Blazor, the hybrid WebView app, Maui app Android emulator, and Maui app Windows, right? And they are not started. Unless you kind of like specify otherwise or the integration has a default setting, Aspire will start the resources, will start your project, and it knows the order of things, right? Because you have the references and things, so it knows to wait for things, it knows to wait for your database, for your other stuff. But here, for the Maui apps, I've set it to explicit start, right? So you need to do an explicit start. So that means they're not started. You really have to press like the run button right here because Maui apps tend to take a little bit longer, right? They can deploy for minutes sometimes, depending on what you're running on. So, and maybe you don't even want to run the Maui application this time, right? So we've opted to run that only on demand whenever you wanted to. So they're not started by default. But they're all here. And whenever I do start one, let's just click the regular Maui Windows one. It's going to take a little bit of time, right? Because it's going to build the Maui application. And this is one of the things I want to improve because it automatically goes to running right now. I want to have it say building so that it reports the right status. But you can go in here into the console and you can at least say like, hey, something is going on. And at some point here, it will say like, okay, it's actually launching. And of course you will see it come up, right? So give it a little bit of time right here, right now. This is something that we definitely want to improve, that I'm going to improve, but it's not right here, right now. The other thing is that we want to probably have some kind of like build queue because we're now running off a single project, right? At least like the Maui app ones are, because this is single project. So for Android, for Windows, for whatever targets, platforms that you have implemented, it will all run from that one project. So if I would very quickly now also press the Android one, then chances are that it will say like, hey, these files are already used by another process, right? Because I'm still building the Windows app of the same project. So we want to add something there to, safeguard that a little bit. So if you run into that, just have a little bit of patience. Whenever the Windows app is running right now, like it is right here, then you can start running the Android one and it will all come up the right way, right? You can definitely do that. Okay, so before I start doing these things, let's see what else we got here. This is just the Aspire dashboard, right? You can see all the console output from all the different projects going through here. The structured logs, right? So we got all of that and we can inspect it per kind of like the project that's running right here. The traces, so you can see the traces. These are the GET requests that I just did through the browser. So you can see those showing up from the web API side. And we have metrics. We have metrics from our web API, but also from our .NET MAUI app. So you can see, hey, how many HTTP active request clients do I have? how many garbage collections do I have? You can inspect all these metrics from your .NET MAUI app on Windows, but also Android and iOS, which is really, really cool. So we got all that. And then I didn't even show you the most important part maybe, which is like, hey, we have that little identifier here. Let me close this console right here. With the web API, right? So we got that. And then inside of our MAUI app, what we can say is like, hey, we want to reference that address. So we don't need to kind of like fiddle with, hey, what was that address again? So let me go over to our sample MAUI app right here. And in our MAUI program, we're going to have to say, hey, we want to wire up those service defaults, right? So we're going to have a reference to that service defaults project that I mentioned earlier. And then what we can say is like, hey, we add an HTTP client for the iWeather service, which is something that lives in my MAUI application. I have made this abstraction here, not strictly necessary, but I got it. And then whenever you do that, whenever something is requested, we're going to create a client with a base address of HTTPS. It prefers HTTPS. It can also use HTTP if that's what it wants, to web API, which is that little identifier that we've just seen in the AppHost. So yes, if you want to go to production, you have to separate these values here because this only works in your development environment, right? But then you can totally do that. And you don't need to know what the address is, what the port is, and then for another developer on your team is going to be another port. Just use this identifier and it will automatically do it. And now what you can do for this HTTP client, if we actually go to that weather service, let's find it right here, the weather service, we can just inject that. Here you can see it, weather service, HTTP client. It will get injected through dependency injection. And you can just do calls on it. HTTP client, get from JSON async, blah, 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 blah. You don't need to know anything about the address, where it lives. Aspire will wire that up for you. So if we do that, if you just click here, load weather, you can see the weather is coming up, right? I didn't need to configure anything. I didn't need to be like, oh, localhost port 5182, and then on another machine it's something else. No, it will just figure it out based on that identifier in our AppHost, right? And the really cool thing is from there, we can go into the Aspire dashboard and we can look at the structured logs and you can see, well, not structured logs, sorry. You can see the MAUI app, so you can see all of that, which is great. I wanted to go to the traces and you can see, hey, we have this MAUI app Windows that initiated a request to the web API. It took this long. I can click into it. I can get all these details and you can see all these cool things. And whenever something goes wrong, you can go in here too. You can see the details of the HTTP response code that came back, and you can inspect all these things about it. Again, metrics, structured logs, service discovery. One more thing before I leave you to discover this for yourself. Of course, this is the Windows app, right? So if I would run this on the Android emulator, let's just start it. It takes a little bit of time to come up. So I have the Android emulator already running here. It should come up here in a couple of minutes. Maybe I can talk long enough so that it will actually show up. But what you then want to do, maybe probably, especially when you're running on mobile, is get the best performance, right? And one of the things that we also did do in .NET MAUI, the .NET MAUI SDK, is add all kinds of telemetry to that. So that will start emitting all kinds of telemetry too. Now it's not going to show up because I didn't enable it right now, but in that service defaults project for your MAUI project, so let me go here, MAUI app.service defaults. It's just added to your project as this code file, right? So if you're like, I don't like these defaults, that's just something that made sense to us, and we think it will make sense to you. But if you're like, that's not, it's not for me, you can change everything in here. Configure OpenTelemetry, add service discovery, right? So that makes that identifier HTTPS, HTTP thing work. Standard resiliency, all these kinds of things. That's great. OpenTelemetry logging. And here you can see, hey, OpenTelemetry with some configuration, uncomment the following line to enable reporting metrics coming from the .NET MAUI SDK. We've disabled that by default because it can be a little bit noisy. But if you just remove this comment right here and right here, you'll get all kinds of telemetry starting with how long a element or a view or whatever, any UI element takes to render, and that will show up in your logging in the .NET Aspire, sorry, I shouldn't say .NET Aspire, in the Aspire dashboard as well. So you will get all that, and you can easily spot like, oh, this button takes like super long to lay out, or I have like 3 stack layouts nested into each other, and that apparently takes a really long time to render. Maybe I should look into that, right? So you can enable that, and you will get all this useful information about your .NET MAUI project in here yourself. So let's see if the Android app came up as well. Here it is, exact same code. I can also click that, load the weather forecast. This goes through the dev tunnel and back and still gives you all these things. And then whenever I go to traces, you can now see that for whatever reason, the Android source doesn't show up here. So something is not quite right here for the demo. Of course, I shouldn't be doing this off script, but typically if you set this up, it should be a setting up for your Android emulator here as well and your Android project, and it should all show up nicely. But this is preview stuff, right? Preview stuff. Whoops, I'm just looking here at how long this is already recording, and this video is becoming a little bit longer than anticipated. Sorry for that, but there is just so much good stuff to show, right? I think this will greatly improve your inner dev loop for your .NET MAUI applications, and we got a lot more plans that you might not have even thought about is possible with all this setup. But definitely let us know your feedback down in the comments. Does this look useful? Have you already been using it? Is it super useful? What will you be using it for? What won't you be using it for? Everything is good, even if it's working perfectly and you're like, this is amazing. Please let us know down in the comments. Or maybe you're like, what is this Aspire stuff? I have no clue. Let me know that as well so I can create any follow-up videos for you, and we will be doing that. In fact, just check out this video right here, which is next on my channel, and I'll see you for that one.